Great. So thanks everyone for being with us today. Welcome to our Climate Action Accelerator webinar on simplifying LCA findings for procurement and operations in the humanitarian sector. My name is Sonja Schmid. I'm leading the Climate Solutions and Analytics team at the Climate Action Accelerator. So before we get started with the content, just a few practical information. Next slide, please. We talk about two key elements today. The one on our approach to categorizing products to simplify findings of life cycle analyses, and then also an LCA framework to improve comparability of LCAs across the sector. And then we should have sufficient time for questions at the end of the session. The webinar is recorded. It will be made available on replay on our website and YouTube channel. Your audio and video is off by default. And if you would like to ask a question, we would kindly ask you to write in the Q&A section that you find on the bottom of the page. And then we will read out the questions during the Q&A sessions. Translation is also available via the automatic tool that's built in Zoom. Next slide, please. So just to click on the small arrow next to the icon show captions, like you see on the picture, and then select so you need to select the spoken language and also the language you want to translate to. Just a brief introduction to the Climate Action Accelerator before we get started. So we're a non-profit organization based in Geneva. We're aiming to mobilize a critical mass of organizations that provide essential services to populations to scale up the implementation of climate solutions and to stay within planetary boundaries and keep global warming well below 2 degrees. We work mostly in the aid, health, and we're exploring the education and research sector, and we support them on their path towards greater resilience and a radical transformation of their practices to achieve an ambitious decarbonization trajectory in line with the Paris Agreement. We currently have more than 40 partners on board. They are made up of both, next slide please. They're made up of both like large international but also smaller national organizations, and we really are almost right now at half, so half international NGOs and other half like smaller national NGOs that have joined the Climate Action Accelerator and are committed to reducing their emissions in line with science and reducing other environmental impacts of their operations. And for the smaller national organizations, it's really on supporting them on a low carbon development path and also working on adaptation and resilience with them. Next slide. So for the webinar today, we are 3 speakers. Sarah Joseph, that many of you will know, a post-doctoral researcher at the Center for Humanitarian Logistics and Regional Development, CHORD. She uses data-driven approaches, for example, life cycle assessments to measure and improve the environmental sustainability of supply chains. And then we have Quentin Roques, who is a climate analytics officer at the Climate Action Accelerator, a digital engineer specializing in AI and data science by training. He helps our partners to measure emissions, set targets, and track progress, and with some previous experience on carbon accounting in the industrial sector. Then myself, I'm both a moderator and a presenter of part of the presentation today. I'm heading the solutions and analytics team, and I have experience in sustainability and notably in purchasing and procurement standards. Then, before we get more into the content of both the product categorization and the LCA framework, I would just like to provide a short overview of the project and also put it into context of our previous LCA work. So, as many of you might know, we previously, so last year, conducted a first LCA project in collaboration with ICRC and the Swiss Technical University EPFL, where we analyzed 13 key relief and medical items based on the ICRC supply chain, with the goal of, on the one hand, providing improved emission factors for these products, and also identifying decarbonization potential, or like having data on, what is possible when, for example, using recycled material for blankets or changing the composition of hygiene kits. And the idea was really to make available this information both open access, but also really in an easy to understand manner for practitioners. So we'll add the link to the results in the chat in a moment, so you can already see like the results of this first project, really with a view to providing open access to LCA results, and not, often this information is really kept internally at organizations and not shared further due to privacy concerns or data protection concerns. So the current project, though, it's like a follow-up project. It's financed by the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Crisis and Support Center. There's like two major components. So one is a methodology to provide information on environmental and human health hotspots for top product categories of the sector. So the idea is really to, instead of having individual NCAs, have product categories and provide really key information per category, key impact hotspots per category, perform the assessment of hotspots of these 5 product groups, and then transform the results of the analyses into concrete and actionable recommendations for operational teams and buyers. And Sarah and Quentin will talk about that in a moment. And then the second major component is the development of a harmonized sectoral LCA framework in order to improve the comparability of LCA results. So this was also something that was noted as one of the sort of recommendations of the study that was conducted by DG ECO also last year. It's really the lack of comparability of LCAs in the sector due to different system boundaries, due to different impact indicators that are used. So yeah, we're proposing this sectoral framework, and again, we will go into more detail in the second step. The project started in November last year and will be completed in October this year. And with that, I hand over to Sarah. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonja. So building off of the product categorization, so what we know so far by existing LCAs in the humanitarian sector, but also for products that are relevant for the humanitarian sector, so for example, masks, we know that similar products in similar product groups, let's say, often have similar hotspots or similar environmental impacts. So for example, tarpaulins and tents often have the same environmental problems. Keeping that in mind, we wanted to figure out a way that we can, practitioners can easily access information on how to reduce the impact of the items that they buy and also the supply chain, but without having to redo an LCA for every product. Go to the next one. So the goal of this project, partly, as Sonja mentioned before, was to also develop an approach to generalize LCA findings across similar products, with the goal of providing impact hotspots per product group. And why do we want to do this? I mean, several reasons, but a big part is to reuse the existing knowledge, save time and resources. For those of you who conducted carbon accounting or life cycle assessments, you know that it requires quite a bit of time, also expertise. There's a learning curve involved. Also implies budget is necessary to conduct an LCA from scratch. At the same time, there's also many completed LCAs, so there's a strong foundation to build on, the studies themselves, but also those working within the sector who have done many LCAs and kind of can see where the patterns are arising. And when we group the products together, this allows us to also use the results of past LCAs and kind of transforms into lessons. that reduce the need for practitioners, but also people working in organizations or in regions where there's limited resources, limited capacity to conduct them themselves, life cycle assessments themselves. And in the end, the results will be open access, so they'll be fully available with the goal to accelerate impact assessment for the key items in the humanitarian sector. So when we've talked now about product categories, product types, product groups, maybe what has come to mind is this usual typical categorization. So it's usually grouped by usage or thematic similarity. So for example, medical items are often considered in one group, but if you look at this list, you see that there's many different types of items here: syringes, medicines, gloves, tests, bandages, thermometers, stethoscopes. And if you think for a moment, probably the environmental impacts of a syringe are quite different than a pharmaceutical, for example, or a thermometer. And imagine you're someone in a procurement officer and you want to purchase something that you think is more sustainable. It would be very hard to say, okay, let's apply a general medical environmental impact hotspot. That doesn't really work because these items are very different. So we go to the new approach here, which is rather to group the products by their shared hotspots and characteristics. So if we take the same example of medical item, you can see that they're now grouped into several different example product groups. So we have, for example, plastic and single use. And within this is syringes, gloves, bandages. You have chemicals, which would include medicals, disinfectants, electronics, thermometers, and diagnostic devices, and textiles, which would be gauze or surgical drapes. There's many different items also in this. So, for example, plastic and single use may also include things that are outside of the medical, like single use shelter items, single use NFIs, for example. You can go to the next slide. And here we can see a few exemplary categories of these categories and the impact hotspots. So Quentin will describe this more in detail, but basically what was done is looked at the existing LCAs and then grouped these and tried to find the hotspots. So for example, the plastic and single use, the main hotspot is typically the raw material extraction and the end of life. This is also very relevant when we consider medical items that must be incinerated. And then a key impact would then be the resource use itself and the plastic pollution at the end. If we think about electronics, this resource use in the early stage, so for to have the raw materials or to produce the electronics, the manufacturing and the extraction of, for example, rare metals. When we think about animal-based products, so now we're branching into food, which is on its own a bit more complex than other items. We know that animal-based products tend to have a higher environmental impact than plant-based food products, but they're also maybe different. So the farming, the breeding, the production have impacts on land use and biodiversity. And then so on and so forth. We have field-dependent use phase. So this could be items that require energy, which then result in greenhouse gas emissions, or, for example, chemicals that have a high manufacturing and use phase, which have then impacts on ecotoxicity and human toxicity. And for all the LCAs we did, these followed this sort of similar end result where we're trying to identify a main hotspot, key impact, and then the hotspots themselves indicate the life cycle stages that are responsible for the highest impacts. And then the key impacts themselves are identifying which one is the most relevant. And in the end, what we would like to have is practitioner-friendly outputs. The goal of this is to take a very large existing knowledge base and distill it down so that it's easy to use for practitioners and for those who don't necessarily have expertise in life cycle assessment and environmental accounting. So we're looking at typical products, transferring that into typical hotspots and impacts for products and groups, and then applying, indicating what can be solutions to this, actual measures relevant to that specific product, and then providing key supplier questions and recommendations on how to handle the different products in which category they are. Accompanying this would be also easy to understand videos for selected product categories. And with this, I will pass over to Quentin, who will go into the methodology.
Thanks, Sarah. Now I'm going to explain to you how we created those categories. So the first step was really to gather information and to select the key and the top items to collect all the available LCAs and other informations we can find on them, and also to build a decision tree to help us categorize. I will talk a bit later on how we build this decision tree. Then the second step, which is currently in progress, is to build the categories, finalize the categories by using all the inputs from the phase one to group items to group them by hotspots, by impacts, by solutions, and so to create like meaningful and actionable categories. And then once we will have all the categories identified, we will, for each one of them, identify the hotspots, the solutions, the supplier questions to create this practitioner-oriented document that Sarah just presented. What we have done in the first phase, so it's in two steps. So the first one on the top items, we really wanted to have the maximum coverage of the key humanitarian products that we can have. So we built a list of almost 90 items, and we by identifying some of the key items for the sectors in the footprints and in some LCAs that we have been able to find. And the goal by doing this list is to avoid any significant blind spots and ensure that all the key items are categorized in our categories. And on the other end, we created 5 different trees here to really be able for these items to identify all the potential impacts that can have in the different life cycle phase of each items, and to ensure that finally we have all the impacts taken into account when we build the categories. And so we have these two first materials we can build on, and we do the categories using the decision tree, and then so that's the theoretical approach we can see into. We took each one of the 90 items, and we ask each one of the question of the decision tree, and we have the outputs, which is like a code which reflects all the answers. And we also have the more data-driven approach with all the LTAs that we have from the sector, and we combine those two approaches to create the final categories with a theoretical and like a real-world data-driven approach in the same categories. And so just to show to you how the numbers of items evolve. So first we have the 90 top items. Then by using the decision tree, we have like around 50 grouped items, because for 40 of them the responses were identical in between. So we managed to cut by almost half the number of different codes. And then with these 50 different categories, we managed to go to around 20. We don't know exactly how many we will have, but around 20 with just by grouping the similar categories and by looking at the impact and the data in the LCAs. And the next steps are for each one of these categories to really identify the impact hotspots on the solutions and to test if the categories need to be a little bit reassessed or not. The idea with this approach is that we will have categories that we will be able to use in the long term, and that we won't be need an update every year or so on. So the idea is really to have like a scientific strong methodology to create a robust categories, and then just be able to use them for a long time. And now I'll let the floor to Sonja for the framework.
Thank you both of you. And yeah, we first go through the whole presentation, and then we'll take we have time for questions. So yeah, as mentioned before, the second major part of the project is also to develop a framework to harmonize and improve comparability of LCAs in the sector. So what the starting point is that there are many LCAs that were done already in the sector, but it's quite difficult to compare the results. On the one hand, due to methodological differences, but also it's sometimes quite difficult to understand the output document of LCAs. It's often quite technical and really hard to understand for practitioners. So what we're proposing is a harmonized framework / guidance document. So the goal is really twofold. On the one hand, providing this basis to allow for comparison of results, but also to provide some guidance for practitioners to help them when they want to conduct an LCA, be it through a supplier or be it through, for example, a consultant that supports them in the process. Next slide, please. Yeah, I mentioned the why for whom. So yeah, it's really the idea is to have a document that is both for LCA, let's say, experts. So experts more in the sense that they will be able to apply what is asked in the document, and non-experts with a view to providing the information in sort of an easy to understand manner. And it's really geared towards humanitarian organizations that want to perform an LCA or request their suppliers to provide them with an LCA of a specific item. So what is included in this document? So we have a one-page supplier guidelines really to harmonize the LCA results, including impact indicators. There's also an explanation of key concepts that are linked to life cycle assessments. Really, here it's for the practitioners to really understand what does it mean, a system boundary, and the different terms that are used, what is behind it. And we also added some practical considerations when conducting or requesting LCA. So, for example, how much time is needed in order to do so. Next slide. Then I just would like to highlight a few key elements of the harmonized this harmonized framework. We had these discussions with the technical team, because many of the elements are actually, not all, but many are actually included in ISO norms. But ISO norms are very useful, but they're also quite complex documents and very long, and also not specific to the humanitarian sector. So here it's really breaking this down, what is included in an ISO norm, and making the same information just available in a more, in an easier to understand manner. Next slide. Then what is actually then harmonized as part of this framework? So it's mainly the system boundaries. So that means which life cycle phases does the LCA actually cover? So mostly it's either cradle to gate, so from the raw materials to the factory gate, or the whole life cycle from the extraction of the raw materials to the end of life. So the way when the product becomes waste. So here the idea is really usually to request cradle to gate, notably when suppliers are asked to provide LCA data. Usually, they stop at the factory gate, and then for other use cases to really cover the whole cradle to grave boundary. Next slide. And then also and I think this is really key, to harmonize as much as possible, or at least to have a basis for common impact indicators. So many LCAs only cover or very focused on the climate change dimension of impacts. So what we propose, and the document is really open for comments, and we'll show the link to the public consultation in a second. So this is really what, after this discussion and with the experience from previous projects, so we would propose to always request climate change and human health as the indicators that are requested in LCAs, and then other aggregated indicators like water use and ecotoxicity to be recommended. And if then an organization would like to add additional indicators, they are of course free to do so, but at least there would be a joint basis. We have climate change and human health sort of as the basis, ecotoxicity and water use, I guess, recommended, and then additional indicators as the organization or the consultant sees relevant. Why human health? So the human health indicator is an aggregated indicator of different impact areas that affect human health. And given that, in the humanitarian sector, the idea is to support beneficiaries and to provide them with aid or essential services. The idea is then not to have adverse impacts on populations through the services that are provided. So typically, what we see or what we saw in previous LCAs, that in the waste management or the lack of waste management often has adverse human health impacts, and notably on the population on the ground. So from our perspective, it was important to capture that element. But we would really like to get your inputs on this part, be it today or also as part of the public consultation. So just to sort of sum up, what are the resources that are provided by the framework? So practical considerations on how to conduct an LCA, be it, if you do it in-house, like what software and tools are available, the expected timeline and efforts, as well as a simplified LCA workflow to have like an overview of which steps are done, explanations of each of these steps, and then the guidelines for suppliers. Next slide. So yeah, as mentioned, we would like to get your inputs on this framework. So there's an online questionnaire that's available, and I would really like to encourage you to participate in the survey, in the public consultation. We would, as mentioned, we did like a first suggestion to have something to have a basis to start with, but we would really like to have your inputs. So be it on the usefulness of the document, is it easy to understand, and what is your view on the suggested impact indicators. So it would be much appreciated if you were able to participate. For now, the public consultation will be open until 31st of July. If you need more time to respond, then please let us know. We're also open to extending the deadline. Notably, that's now the summer period, but the indicative deadline is 31st of July. Yep. And with that, we open the floor to questions. I don't think there are any questions in the chat so far. Would anyone like to would anyone like to ask a question? All clear. All right. So if there's no questions, then maybe I can maybe we can go a little bit deeper into some of the points that were mentioned. So maybe Sarah, if you would like to add anything on from your perspective and from your experience with the LCAs, like either you conducted or that you reviewed. Maybe we go first on the LCA framework because we just discussed this part, and then we can go a little bit deeper on the product categorization. But maybe you would like to add anything like further background information on how you see the need for this framework and some of the thinking that's behind. Just if you would like to add anything, any more detail.
Yeah, sure, Sonja. I mean, I think that there's an increasing demand for measuring, potentially also for life cycle assessments. And the problem is that within the sector, I think everyone knows that there's a reduced resources, increased demand, less time, less capacity. And the problem is that when you need to now do things that require more resource and more capacity with less, that obviously creates a challenge. And what we see with the existing life cycle assessments is that there's patterns that arise. So if we're thinking about the categorization, that's one thing, but just in general, just a methodology. So if you do need to do a life cycle assessment, doing it without having a clear direction can be quite challenging. And the goal is also, if everyone's doing the individual life cycle assessment with their own sort of version of a methodology, then that also creates a situation in which it's really hard to compare across different LCAs. And I think Quentin, who can really second that, since he's been going through life cycle assessments of over 90 products and pulling out how do you actually put them together with that exercise. And so the goal of this is really to have this more simplified process. But I think overall, the framework is on one side very necessary, but I think that the categorization and really being able to get environmental insights that are more detailed than just, I don't know, something simple like try to reduce waste, but rather about like this particular material in this product is often a challenge. Is there a way that you can substitute it for a product, for example, that doesn't have PVC plastic in it? I think that's a key step towards reducing environmental impacts and making system change without actually forcing everyone to do life cycle assessments, which are quite time consuming and require a lot of data. So that's what I could say from my experience is that I think really trying to take the burden off of practitioners who already have so much that's on their plate, and also importantly to not just say environmental sustainability is not considered, because then that's maybe the trade-off of saying we don't have the time or resources to do this, so we don't consider sustainability, which in the end it creates then more need for humanitarian support because over time you have increased environmental impacts which just build up over time. I maybe pass over to Sonja because I see there's also a question in the chat.
Hi. Thank you for the presentation and the project. Thanks for the feedback. For the support to the development of new LCAs, how do you best coordinate the compilation of needed data coming from different teams and locations within the same organization or its partners or stakeholders, while also ensuring accuracy? Does the new harmonized framework touch on this challenge? So it's really about the data collection. How does this framework also support the data collection and support with really the sort of the wealth of data that might come from different teams and location? Quentin, do you want to go first?
Yeah. So in this framework, there is no like data collection tool for an LCA or something like that. It's we have explained like which data do you need for which phase, and which impacts can you calculate it based on this data. And we have put some links to open tool like OpenLCA that can help you to have a global view on the data needed and to gather the data that you need in one place once you have it. But yeah, on the more like personal, like how you deal with these people in your organization that have the data on logistics and so on, there is like no real like framework in this document.
And maybe I could just add on to that is within the sector, there's obviously many different types of products, but they are falling under kind of certain groups where you could assume some certain let's say similarities, and that's also what we do with the product categorization. But if you're doing a life cycle assessment yourself, for example, like the transport data, the supply chain itself, so after the item has already been produced and purchased, that's much easier to coordinate. And that data is easier to get and much more straightforward. So by doing the first part of kind of the data needs at the raw material extraction, the production part, and providing information on products and categories that can then be combined also within the framework, I could say, because we provide general things with the categorization, but with the framework, then you can do your LCAs themselves. But if you already know what the product is made of and kind of where the hotspots are at the early end of the supply chain, then it's a lot easier to do the lower part. So the most complicated part of the supply chain is typically the upstream for the life cycle assessment, like to actually the production part. So the data collection and the coordination, and the downstream is a little bit easier. So that maybe makes it a little bit easier, but not always so straightforward.
Yeah. Thanks, Sarah. And I think it's also sort of as you mentioned, Sarah, the goal is really to take off the burden from individual organizations to produce LCAs, with the goal of better understanding where the key impact. So the idea is really that we provide through this project information to the key hotspots. So we already have now the LCAs that were on the previous project that provide, there's a first selection of products. There's also additional LCAs that were conducted, that were mapped through as part of the DG ECHO project that are now in the REC repository. And then now we're going to add really this categorization of products. So that I think the first question is really that an organization should ask themselves is really, what do I need this LCA for? Do I actually need to conduct my own? Or what I would like to get from this LCA, can I actually obtain it through existing information? And maybe, Quentin, if you could show the slide with the entry points how we're envisioning how to access the different information. It's just the slide before, I think. And if you could just share, perfect. And I'll let you present it. And before you do, I just would like to say that as part of the project, we're also gonna work on how the LCA results will be presented on our website, to really make it as sort of really user-friendly and interactive as possible. So that's also part of the project where we're gonna further improve the user-friendliness of the repository and make it really easy for practitioners to understand key data. But Quentin, maybe if you could just explain how we envision that the information can be accessed.
Yeah. What you will need to do to use the categorization is, so first, of course, to like identify for which item do you want to see the hotspots, the impacts, and so on. And then the list of 90 humanitarian items that we use to create the categories, you will have it accessible, and you will know if your item is part of this. If it's part of this list, you will automatically have the link to the correct categories, the final categories, and you will be able to see all the inputs of these categories, meaning like the supplier questions, the key hotspots, and so on. And if it's not part of this 90 items, what you will have to do is to answer some questions, and the answer to those questions will that will create a path that will go to the correct final categories, and then you will be able to access to all of the categories outputs. And so just to show you quickly what kind of questions. So that's the questions that we used, the decision tree we used to create the categories. And this will be almost not the same one, but it will be a similar one that you will have to answer to find the categories. So it's really like aimed to be yes, no question, and questions that you will be able to answer knowing your item. And so some of the on the raw materials, some of the on the productions, and so on. And so that's that's how you access to the correct categories, and then to all the material on these categories.
Perfect. So I don't see any more questions, neither in the chat nor in the Q&R section. So if there's no more questions, then I think we can close the webinar for today. And maybe just to wrap up, and also Sarah and Quentin, please feel free to say a few words to wrap up. But maybe just to say that really that I just would like to reiterate the point that the idea is really to try and provide this information, open access to the sector, so that we can reduce the burden of individual organizations to conduct LCAs on individual products. As mentioned, Sarah and Quentin, there's really this. So they really found the similarities already in the hotspots with this categorization. So it's quite promising that we can get really the key information that we need in order to address like the most important environmental and human health impacts. So yeah, I just wanted to reiterate the point about really that the key goal of the project is to really take away burden to conduct LCAs for individual organizations. And then I would just like to reiterate our request to join the public consultation and to provide feedback on the framework. As said, it's really a sort of proposal, and we would really like to make it relevant for the sector. So please do participate in the public consultation. Sarah, Quentin, would you like to say any last words?
My note is that, I'm continuing to work through iterative process, and looking forward to see how it turns out.
Perfect. Then, my colleagues just put also the link to the previous webinars. We will send out the recording to those that signed up, and also the recording, as said, will be available on our website. And then if you would like to discuss, in further details, anything related to this product, you can also contact me directly, or Quentin. And wishing you a nice rest of the day. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.